Good afternoon. We'll now call the meeting of the Waco City Council, January 21st, 2020, to order at 3 p.m. Welcome to our guests. All council members are present. Please join us for a moment of silence. Thank you. We will now recess the regular session and convene to work session with a report from the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. There are no changes to the agenda today. Under employee recognition, I'd like to recognize our finance department. I don't know if our CFO, Janice Andrews, is here today, but I know she's been in meetings on Tyler Munis conversion this morning, so she may not be here. But at the end of 2019, we received a certificate of achievement from the Government Finance Officers Association for excellence in financial reporting for the fiscal year 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. This is the 37th consecutive year that Waco has received this certificate of achievement.
It's amazing.
Yes. That may be why she didn't show, or she's just now showing up. Time, so, you know.
Great
Thank
work.
you, Janice.
Yeah, thanks, Janice.
Also, under employee recognition, I'd like to recognize Randy Childers. Before retirement, this is his last council meeting after 32 years of service. And among his many great accomplishments here at the city is he was the commissioner of the Bledsoe Miller Public Employees Basketball League, where he supervised the play of such superstars as Art Pertile and Larry Groth. So he has great development skills, and you can see bringing on a couple of players like that, that was some extra work that he did for the city. So, but seriously, Randy, we really appreciate all your work over the years, the guidance you've given all our development group, and the leadership that you provided the city. And I know you've reached outside that group and helped us in a number of other areas, and we really do appreciate it. So congratulations on your retirement, well deserved.
Thanks, Randy.
Under informal reports, there is one today. It's an informal report having to do with council meeting follow-up questions on the low-income housing tax credit programs. And Galen Price, our housing and inspections director, code enforcement director, is here if you have any questions on that.
Questions?
Good report.
Yep. Thank you. And now I'd like to call on Larry Hosey for the Hosey report.
All right, thank you very much. Turn your attention to your monitors and we'll take a look at some great pictures. As you can imagine, getting to the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame and Museum and the Visitors Bureau during the latest I-35 construction closures is a challenge. The good news is the museum staff are regularly posting access information and changes to their website and Facebook pages. Also, most museum visitors arrive via GPS systems, and most of these now use real-time, like Google Maps and Apple Maps. As of this morning, both Apple and Google services are up to date, instructing southbound visitors to exit at MLK and take the access road to University Parks. From the south, the exit remains unchanged for now. Reports of crime for Waco in the 2019 are down for the 13th consecutive year. This follows an overall downward trend for reported crime over the last 20 years. Violent crime reports are down 4% over 2018 numbers, and nonviolent crime reports show to be down 6% for an overall measured decrease of 5%. When final tallies are made before reporting to the state and federal government, Waco PD expects to see larger decreases when adjusted for population increases over the last year. For 49 consecutive years, Waco has been home base for the annual Texas High School Baseball Coaches Association Convention. This year, the Waco Convention Center welcomed more than 3,000 coaches and vendors back to their annual conference for the weekend of January the 9th through the 11th. The 24-member Chinese national rowing team has been in Waco for the past several weeks, training on the Brazos River for this year's 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. The team is working to build up their cardiovascular systems, rowing, which is an extremely aerobic activity. Baylor University's reputation and welcoming support also appeal to the athletes. They're expected to be here through February. The Masonic Grand Lodge of Texas held their 184th annual communication from January the 16th to the 18th at the Masonic Grand Lodge on Columbus Avenue. The event is the oldest convention meeting in Waco, bringing over 4,000 members along with their spouses to our city each year. 2020 marks the 117th year Waco has hosted the communication in their beautiful lodging building and auditorium in downtown Waco. In recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday, January the 20th, a wreath-laying ceremony commemorating the life of Dr. King was held Friday, January the 17th at noon at the Bledsoe Miller Recreation Center, and a parade and candlelight vigil was held on Monday, January the 20th. Razak, the zoo's orangutan, celebrated his third birthday with a celebration on January the 12th, complete with cake and presents. And speaking of births at the zoo, 2 new babies were born during the holidays. Meet Dasher, a great kudu calf that was born on Christmas Day, and Drax, the new Cherokee calf, was born on October the 21st. The new arrivals are being kept inside the quarantine area until they get a little older and the weather is a little bit warmer. Hopefully they'll join their parents on display later in February. The Council District 3 cleanup was held on Saturday, January the 18th, where Keep Waco Beautiful helped residents dispose of brush and other bulky items at curbside. And coming up, Cameron Park sculpture dedication will be Sunday, February the 9th, and the next City Council District cleanup will be held in District 4 on Saturday, February the 29th. And that completes my report.
Had a great report, Larry. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Mayor and Council, under public hearings today, there are 4, and Clint Peters will be here to review the planning public hearing items in work session. The resolutions, there are 9 today, and I'd like to touch on just a few of those. Resolution 2020-049 approves an agreement with the Texas Workforce Commission and the Workforce Development Board to certify $479,169 of local matching funds for child care services within the workforce areas in order to expand the availability of federal child care funding in the Waco area. This is something we do every year.
I just really, before you move on, Wiley, I want to thank Parks and Rec for their willingness to do this. I think it goes a long way to saying that how the city of Waco supports our local people through after-school programs, through summer programs, and looking for creative opportunities to just help fund programs like these that are much needed in our community. And so I just really want to thank Wiley, you and your staff and our Parks and Rec departments for just being on top of this and making sure that we offer this to our constituents and our community every single year. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Resolution 2020-050 is a 2-year agreement with the Waco Hispanic Museum for the use of space within the South Waco Community Center to display museum items and store any necessary equipment.
Once again, I want to say something. This also, I just want to thank you for doing this. I know this is something that my predecessor, Councilwoman Rodriguez, started, and I know it's very near and dear to her, and it's a very important museum to our community, our Hispanic community, and so to see the city of Waco just put this forward and really partner with the Hispanic community, to me, speaks volumes. And so just once again, thank you for doing this and renewing the agreement. And I know there are talks already about expanding the museum and just really preserving and keeping that historical culture that's in our community, and how do we make that available to everyone. So I really do appreciate the city of Waco offering this as well. So thank you for that.
Echo Hector on there, Councilmember Sabito on that one. That's a cool museum over there, and I encourage anybody that hasn't been over there to go visit, because it does have a lot of nice heritage on the Hispanic influence on the city. And also there's a picture of Councilmember Rodriguez dancing as a 12 years old or something like that.
That's right.
Really cool historical deal there. But yeah, it's a neat, I'm glad that we're extending this relationship.
Yeah, as a proponent of historic preservation and displaying culture, I was privileged enough to be able to write a story for Authentic Texas Magazine about our Hispanic community and the culture of that, including that of the museum. And it was something that brought attention throughout the state of Texas, one of the jewels and treasures that we have here. Mm-hmm. So it is important that we continue to do the work that displays and undergirds our cultural foundation that makes Waco Waco. Mm-hmm. So we did a good thing.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Resolution 2020-054 adopts a low-income housing tax credit program policy for the issuance of resolutions of support by the City of Waco to projects seeking such resolutions for their participation in the low-income housing tax credit program administered by the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs.
Just to comment on that, good language on it, because I think this one, the Exhibit A, is shown on page 106, 107 in the package.
Yeah.
It requires a public hearing, or whatever you call it, where neighborhoods can chime in on how they support, or, there's some communication going on before we have to support it or not support it. So I like the process that is kind of in place for applicants.
I think thoughtful and smart, affordable housing policies are really important for our community. So I think that just looking at this with injecting some strategy into this conversation is critical. I think this is a great starting point. I think we're going to go further with this conversation too, but this is a great place to start. And I appreciate staff's work on putting these boundaries in place, and look forward to continuing to have a dialogue on how we ensure that we have good policies around affordable housing in Waco.
Okay, thank you. Resolution 2020-055 awards a contract to for construction services to Landmark Structures for the Ritchie Road Elevated Storage Tower Project in an amount not to exceed $4,481,000. This is to replace the tower that you see that is out there at this location near Panther Way and Ritchie. And we're replacing a 2 million gallon tower that is a little bit antiquated with a new tower that will provide better circulation for our water. And this is one of the most important water towers we have in Waco because it provides static pressure to the industrial district and fire protection for the industrial district. So we'll be keeping the old tower in service while we build the new tower, and then the old tower will be taken down.
I appreciate this project and the continuing investment in infrastructure out along that corridor, just because it is a rapidly growing and expanding one, and that is where our infrastructure and our facilities are just kind of stretched to or beyond capacity in some instances. So I think this project's really important. I know there's other ones coming, so I just appreciate staff's continued diligence and our recognition of the needs out there.
And if I may add to that, for staff being fiscally responsible as well, my understanding, and Wiley, correct me if I'm wrong, that if we were to fix the existing one, it would cost something to the tune of $3 million. And a little bit further investment, we get a brand new tower, state-of-the-art, more capacity to really better service our growing corridor. And so I just really want to thank the staff for even just in broadening their scope and saying, it's in the long run, it's best if we do this now. So thank you for that.
It's good.
There are 3 ordinances today. The first ordinance is a first reading that amends Chapter 21, Solid Waste, and this is going to be discussed in work session with Assistant City Manager Paul Kane leading that discussion. The 2 remaining ordinances are second readings. However, we did make some changes to Ordinance 2020-058, and City Attorney Jennifer Ritchie was going to review those briefly.
Council, at the first reading of the ordinance, there was a stated concern about retail sales provision needing some tightening. To address this concern, we have added the definitions of breeder and broker to Section 5.1 and added subsection G to Section 5-131. Subsection G creates an offense for a person who provides to a retail store a dog or cat from a breeder or broker. And so we feel like that, we hope that addresses your concerns, and if it doesn't, we can try again, but we hope it does.
It definitely does. Thank you. I know I was the one that brought it up last time, and so thank you for addressing that. I know the Animal Welfare Board is greatly appreciative of that, and so I also want to once again thank David Shaw for the work on this ordinance, and so thank you, staff, for addressing that. It is greatly appreciated.
Good.
Okay. If there are no other questions, that concludes my report.
Okay. Are there any items council would like to remove from the consent agenda?
I think 048, I am not only disqualified, but doubly disqualified, just like Animal House, double secret probation. So we'll go ahead and, although I think, while technically I could speak on it, I'm choosing not to.
Okay, so we will pull Resolution 2020-048, and the consent agenda will consist of resolutions 2020-047 and 2020-049 through 2020-055, unless a visitor card is received on any of the consent agenda items. And I will turn it back to Wiley to introduce the next work session presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first work session presentation is Clint Peters, our Planning and Inspection Director, to discuss the public hearing agenda items. Planning. Clint?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. We do have 4 public hearings this meeting. The first 2 are short-term rentals, the first being at 4500 Kendall Lane. This is in our Timbercrest neighborhood. This is for a short-term rental type 2. Again, the type 2s are the short-term rentals where the owner is not present when the guests are staying. In this case, the owner does live in this house and proposes to leave the home when they rent it out, but they will remain in the Waco area and manage the property when it's rented out. This is off of Kendall Lane, like I said, off close to Loop 340 in our far east Waco area. It is zoned single family. You can see on the map we do have another one that's been permitted and licensed off of Orchard. The blue line shows the 500-foot distance, so it's well outside of that 500-foot buffer. Here's the site. It does have, it's a 3-bedroom home and does have plenty of parking for the 3 parking spaces that are required. Here's a picture of the home. There was no opposition on this one. We actually had 1 card back in favor of it from one of the neighbors, and Plan Commission recommended approval of that request. The next public hearing, 44, is another short-term rental type 2, 2700 Ethel Avenue. This is at the corner of 27th and Ethel in our Dean Highland neighborhood. Another single-family home. The owner does live outside of Waco, but is proposing a real estate company to manage it for the license. Here you can see there are some other short-term rentals that have been permitted and licensed, but this is outside the 500-foot buffer, so it meets that requirement. They do have, it's a 3-bedroom home, and they do have the parking required for 3 spaces. And then here's a picture of the home. Again, on this one, there was no opposition, and Plan Commission recommended approval of that one as well. Then the next request is a bunch of different properties in East Waco in the 300 and 400 block of Bridge and Taylor Street for a zone change from M2 and M3 to C4. This property is about a little over 1.5 acres along Bridge Street in Taylor. There are some public street right-of-ways that have never been built that bisect those that we do anticipate this developer to, in the future, to bring in a abandonment request of those to make all this property consolidated. The current land use plan is our mixed-use flex land use, and then you can see zoning. Currently, there is M2 and M3 on the properties, but there is C4 across Bridge, and C4 is the dominant zoning along our Elm Avenue corridor. And with the recent developments and the plans for Bridge Street are more in line with C4 zoning than the current M2, M3, which are, M3 is a heavy industrial zoning and M2 is also industrial zoning. So the proposed change is in line with the recent development trends in the area. Here's the property. You can see a lot of it's a lot of construction going on with the hotels and then the utility work that coincides with the redevelopment of Bridge and then the Elm Avenue corridor. And Plan Commission did recommend approval of zone change, and there was no opposition on this one.
Clint, may I ask you a few questions on this
Sure.
public hearing, please? So the applicant is requesting a C4 zone change, correct?
That's correct.
And I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is only one other C4 zone in our city right now, or in the area right now? Around the downtown East Waco area?
So, yeah, C4 is our downtown zoning district. So there's quite a bit of C4 zoning on the west side of the river, mainly Austin, Washington,
Sure.
Franklin, Mary, even a little bit further south, and then out to about 11th Street.
Okay.
And then in East Waco, C4 is a dominant zoning along Elm Avenue.
Okay.
And s-
And there are there's, if I'm not mistaken, in the process of making some changes to the C4 zoning where some on-street parking would be allowed, as well as the number of STRs in the condo, not so much an apartment complex, but in the condo per se, that there wouldn't be a limit of STR, so that would apply to this C4 zone change as well, correct?
That's correct. If this was changed to C4, whatever changes we made in the short-term rental that applied to C4, that would apply to this property.
So is there any concern from staff about the parking on the street? Like make sure that there's enough, or is there any cause for concern on that?
Well, so when we look at zoning changes, C4 provides the best opportunity for, I guess, an urban-style development where you have properties built out to the sidewalk, and you have lot coverage where you could get the, I guess, the highest density and the most use out of that property that you would see in an urban setting. So, and with the recent developments and the plans for Bridge, we felt like that was the most appropriate commercial zoning to be in line with those development trends that we're looking to see in that area.
And even going back to the short-term rentals, I know that if there's, and please correct me if I'm saying
Sure.
anything wrong, but if there's an apartment complex, the max number of STRs that could be there are 5.
That's correct.
But if it's a condo, then there are no. If a condo decides to go in this, off the street or in this neighborhood, then there wouldn't be a max number of STRs that can be within that condo building.
So currently, the ordinance in C4 zoning and for short-term rental 3, there's just a maximum of 5 units.
We haven't changed that yet, right?
Right, yeah.
Right. But if
The
it
proposal
passes,
would be, the proposed changes with the STR ordinance were to allow up to 5 per owner.
Per owner.
In a building. So if you had a building, like a condo building that had multiple owners, then they would be allowed to have each. That's correct. So
Right.
you could, potentially would have more than 5 in the total building. But yeah, but still just per unit owner.
Okay. I
But
just
those
wanna-
changes, we're still,
Right,
haven't-
right, but
yeah.
if those changes do pass, and it does affect this area, if we change this
It would.
to zone the C4?
yes, yes,
Okay.
sir.
I just want to make sure I was understanding that correctly. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. And then our last public hearing is a change to our comprehensive plan, and this does go along with the zone change, but we are requesting to change the comprehensive plan to include Bridge Street for permitted zoning districts under the mixed-use flex land use designation. And this, our land use designations are our more general categories where we want to see certain types of development in the future as our city grows. So they're more broad categories in our zoning category, and each of the land use designation has permitted zoning district in those land use designation. And so, our downtown area is mixed-use core, which currently allows C4, and then our mixed-use flex allows C4 zoning just along Bridge Street. And again, just along Elm Street. And again, with the changes in development patterns along Bridge, we would like to add Bridge Street to include C4 zoning in the current mixed-use flex land use category. And so we are recommending, and Plan Commission recommending, to change our land use plan to add Bridge Street where C4 can be along Elm and Bridge Street in mixed-use flex land use designation. And that's all we have.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Clint.
Thank you, Clint. Mayor and Council, our next work session item is a discussion of the Waco Convention Center and Visitors Bureau year-end revenue and sales achievements, future activities, progress on the Tourism Public Improvement District creation. We have Todd Burka, our Director of Waco Convention and Visitors Bureau and Convention Center. Todd?
Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon.
You know it's going to be a long one when I pour water. No, I'm just kidding. Mayor, council.
We got the
city
timer
manager.
running up here.
I'm surprised. It's a pleasure, Mayor, council, city manager, leadership, for us to, and I say us because I'm a reflection of our team and the team efforts, and it's a pleasure for us to have an opportunity to discuss our activities, our accomplishments over the past year, fiscal year. I've been on board now for just over a year now, and it has been a fantastic opportunity with great accomplishments. We've done some really cool things, and we've got a lot of really great work ahead of us. So I'm excited to share some of those accomplishments and where we're headed with you today. Some of the discussion topics we'll be reviewing: fiscal year in review, accomplishments and marketing updates, update on our Waco Tourism Public Improvement District, collaborations, capital and long-term improvements for 2020, as well as opportunities and plans for the coming year. Some of our accomplishments, our highlights in revenue and incomes. You can see here we've had a really solid year on the financial side of the equation. We have collected $4.6 million in hotel occupancy tax on a budget of $4.3. Our Waco Convention Center revenues derived from rents, food and beverage, and ancillary revenues came in at just under $2.1 million on a goal of $1.7. For a fantastic performance there, as well as our grand totals, $6.7 million on a goal of just over $6 million, for a 111% performance on goal. Highlights for our convention sales and event booking numbers. Our repeat bookings came in at 50,000 room nights on a goal of 35,000, for a performance of 145%. Our new room nights came in at 22,000 on a goal of 33, for 67%, and our total room night production of 72,702 was a 107% of our goal of 68,000. Interestingly as well, our number of groups hosted, we anticipated hosting 350 groups. We hosted 388 in the Waco Convention Center this past fiscal year, for a 111% on goal. Some of the highlights and accomplishments that we have embarked on, but not limited to, throughout the past year included the implementation of an event economic impact calculator. This tool allows us to identify the value of the pieces of business that we're going after and the potential economic impact that they would bring to the destination, and we weigh those with our incentives and the kind of programs that we put together with those particular events. We refreshed our Tourism Information Center on the exterior, and we've got some more additional plans for that facility as well. And we created a Waco Adventure Pass in partnership with the Heart of Texas Fair and Rodeo that we implemented during that event this past year. Additionally, we hosted a VIP customer day and dinner event that attracted more than 100 customers and featured chip gains. We marketed out of town with some digital marketing in New York City's Times Square. This video, it's a 10-second video. It played sporadically from November 11th to 17th and aired more than 130 times in Times Square. We'll run it a couple of times so you can see it. Again, the intention is to attract attention to the destination from a tourist and visitor standpoint. We also produced a 30-second video spot for use in multiple markets. Short and sweet, but we think it captures the essence of the destination to a large degree. We embarked on a Light Up the Night initiative around the Convention Center's campus through the holidays, and we're going to be carrying that on throughout the year. We took the wreath down, of course, can't be tacky there, but we're going to continue to light up the trees around the plaza, the Fountain Plaza, as well as the front of the building. And we went on a mission to refresh and extend the life of our existing brand creatives so that we could be nimble and participate in the market segment this coming fiscal year. Some of the new creatives you'll recognize in some of the billboards that we've placed out on I-35 to address the traffic and attention as we look for more business to come to the destination during our construction phase, as well as the airport billboard welcoming and thanking visitors for attending and coming to the destination. We addressed new creatives in the meetings and convention market, as well as some of our leisure market segments. And I'd like to take a few seconds to update you all on the TPID, or Waco Tourism Public Improvement District. As you may or may not recall, we presented to this body back in November of 18, and City Council passed a resolution of support for this initiative. In June, back in 2019, House Bill 1474 was passed by the Texas legislature authorizing the City of Waco to pursue its TPID. We intend to be back to present our recommendations for your consideration sometime in Q1 of this year, and we're on track for a May 2020 start date for this 2% assessment. I have placed a fact sheet at your places there for you to have additional review of what the TPID is, but quickly from a overview standpoint, the TPID is a 2% assessment on Waco hotels of 75 rooms and more, managed by a to-be-formed Waco Tourism Public Improvement District Corporation. These funds collected will be committed 45% to marketing initiatives and efforts, 40% to sales efforts designed to increase hotel room night usage, as well as 15% to tourism research and administrative costs. TPID fund initiatives are intended to generate at least a minimum of a 7-to-1 return on investment. The City of Waco will have an annual administrative review of this program, and our Convention and Visitor Bureau will present an annual marketing plan for these funds.
So on this one, I just want to add a little bit of clarification, because I've, as y'all's representative and chair of the CVB, I've been kind of involved in this, and it took me a little while to wrap my head exactly around the formation and kind of the structure and our responsibility and their responsibility. That first line, that 2% assessment, that's a 2% assessment that the hotels have voluntarily agreed to collect, and that's revenue that they will still be paid taxes on. And this is something that the hotel industry and the hotels within our community have asked us to do and to facilitate. And as such, the to-be-formed tourism, TPID corporation and whatnot will be overseen and managed predominantly by them, because this is their money that they are voluntarily collecting and have just asked us to create this structure in order to leverage our marketing and advertising and sales initiatives and goals to just help their business prosper. And so when it comes to kind of the structure and our oversight and just how much say we get in all of that, I just think it's really important for us to acknowledge and remember that this is a voluntary assessment by the industry that we just play a role in creating the organization, but this is something they're collecting themselves and they want to see used for their benefit, and as such should have a decent say in that. And it's something that I know Todd may get into this or may not later, but just it's something that we've been working on for a year, and that the sooner we kind of get it implemented and get it in front of us and get it done, we'll just be being responsive to the hotel industries and our private sector's wishes and desires on this. So I appreciate their participation and their partnership in this. I appreciate staff's work on this so far. I think this is going to be great. Our estimates are that it'll bring in an extra $1.2 million a year, I think, again, to be used in those percentages, which are going to be locked in part of the agreement. But it will greatly enhance our ability to further our marketing and sales for our community and help our hotel industry continue to prosper and fill those nights. Sure. I miss anything?
Thank you.
All right, good.
Question on that, Todd. Who established the percentages? Was that the CVB that established the percentages here?
The House bill itself.
The House bill it did, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, destinations had the opportunity to have an omnibus presence or a limited presence with the 75 rooms or more, and we went with that threshold and chose that path.
Got it.
Before we go on, I did have a question. So the hoteliers that participate, it's voluntary, correct? So like the new hotels that come online, there is not a requirement for them to participate, or is there?
There will be, once the community establishes this program at a 60% participation level, then all participants, or all new development will participate in the program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And it has a 10-year life, and at the end of 10 years, if we decide we don't need it anymore or whatever, we can, yeah.
Set it at that point.
Exactly.
We've embarked on numerous collaborations throughout the year: Parks and Recreation, facility development, IT, our internal partners to be sure, but not the least of which is our collaboration with Magnolia and the Silo District Marathon, as well as an increased and specific customer experiences that we are collaborating with them on throughout the year. And in addition to that, we are collaborating with the Waco Regional Airport to elevate the guest experience at the airport, not only limited to the food service program, but promotional messaging and the arrival process and the departure process and what that feels like. So our partnership with Joel Martinez has been really positive, and we look forward to elevating that experience. As we speak, we're installing new interactive kiosks for information for travelers when they pass through the airport, coming and going. So we're excited about where we're headed with that partnership.
We do want to thank you for your participation in elevating the airport experience. I mean, not for nothing, we travel, right? And you're in and out of airports all the time. It's amazing what a nice-looking airport makes you feel when you walk in the city. You haven't touched foot on the ground outside of getting off of that plane. But when you're welcomed in that building because you're harried, you've been rushed, you've been sitting, you've been this, a pleasant experience when you walk out of the door changes your positioning. And I look forward to that day when the Waco Regional Airport is that welcoming. But I love the TVs, though.
Fantastic. We have numerous capital, non-capital improvements planned for fiscal '20, not the least of which are the ones that are mentioned here. These are the largest of said improvements that we are embarking on. Hopefully you're enjoying your new council chairs. That didn't make the list, but it certainly made the dais. And it's important to note that no general funds are used in these capital improvements from our operational standpoint. So we're excited about where we're headed with increasing the guest experience in the convention center itself. We have numerous opportunities and plans for the coming year, not the least of which, but highlighted our sales, salary, and incentive comp study, Waco Convention Center booking policy evolution, the Waco Convention Center food and beverage program and operation. We need to address and strategically address the increase in hotel room supply here in Waco, as well as increased destination tourism marketing dollars via the TPID. And we've got marketing opportunities ahead of us, not the least of which are not limited to South by Southwest, Meeting Professionals International, their World Education Congress, as well as an increased presence in social media platforms in order to tell our story and our message. And with that, I'll thank you again for your continuing support. We really appreciate it on behalf of my team and myself, and we'll look forward to answering any questions.
I really appreciate this presentation, Todd. You've done a great job. This is some great work, and I'm really excited about how this all looks and the steps you've taken to communicate our message with excellence. I love the New York Times ads and the out-of-market ads, but one thing that I'll go back to is I still think, and this is just my opinion, and I like the messaging in these materials. I think we need to have a conversation about what exactly our brand is, a community conversation about what Waco is known for, what is our brand, and that will influence how we communicate that to to the masses. And again, I like Follow Your Heart to Waco, but I think that I think that there's some deep dives that we can do potentially to say what is our brand, and then the second question is what do we make that look? How do we make that look beautiful too? I loved the video. I like this material. I think it's a great step. But I think that that's something that I'm hopeful will be a part of 2020 is having a community conversation around our brand to make sure that we are being strategic and that the message that we really think is going to produce the outcomes we want is going to hit the end user. And to that end, if there are any specific outcomes, or I mean, the outcomes seem to speak for themselves in terms of overperforming our goals and budgets, which I really appreciate. But if there's any other, if you ever get run a New York Times ad and there's some sort of click data or something like that, I think that'd be interesting to see too. If there are specific outcomes from some of these efforts, I would be interested in seeing that. So maybe down the road, as you collect that in it for an informal report or something like that, would be helpful for me.
Great, thank you.
Todd, I also want to thank you for this presentation. I know you said you've only been here a little over a year now. It seems like 5 to 10 years, but congratulations on a very successful first year. For you to be 11% over budget in your financials, 7% over rooms booked, 11% over groups hosted. That is nothing to sneeze at, and so congratulations on a wonderful, successful year. I also love the marketing materials. Coming from a marketing background, it's something that I zone in on. I love in the videos that you show the beautiful parts of our community, the downtown area, the museums, the entertainment, the zoo, etc. But one thing I will say that I'm very, very appreciative of is the diversity that you have shown about our community. And I personally feel that diversity is what makes our community so beautiful and so vibrant and so compelling. And so for you to show that in our marketing materials just speaks volumes. And so I really want to thank you for that you take that step forward and not afraid to use it and go for it. And so I do agree with Councilmember Meek that I would love to see some response, when you run ads, whether it's the return on investment, whether it's, what the call to action is, and if it's making the phones ring, if it's pushing people to our website, those are things that I think are just minor tweaks. But other than that, I really want to commend you on a wonderful, wonderful year. Even the plans that you have for this coming year and how you can make some changes that will really have a huge economic impact on people that are coming to our community. So overall, kudos to you, to your team, and job well done. Seriously, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd. I want to first say we appreciate your patience because we realize we've been trying to do this for a while. And finally getting to hear your presentation has been well worth the wait. I also wanted to issue congratulations to you as well as your staff just on the work that you've been able to accomplish this year, from stepping up the welcome experience for the APA conference, or the things like that happened that showed what we really can do, left an excellent impression on my colleagues in that industry, and continue to elevate Waco more and more. So we appreciate you and staff for all of that. In echoing my colleagues in the discussion of what our advertisement looks like, what our brand looks like, that is something that, I think I've said for a very long time, until we concretely say who we are, people will still be able to tell us who we are. And I think that our priority has to be to solidly identify what our brand is. And I think that we have made a definite foray into that and are doing a great job. I don't know that we know exactly yet, but I think that it's a refreshing look, it has a vibrancy, and it has an energy and a feel that I like, so I definitely say we're going in the right direction. Regarding our levels of diversity, it is a welcomed change in seeing. I'm curious, I was watching, what was for the Times Square ads, and I'm curious as to what the target audience was, because I have an idea, but I'm not sure. I want to know if when we're doing intentional markets, who are we selling Waco to? Is it just the young professional? Is it the young professional of color? Is it families? Is it our winter Texans, if you will, or our seasoned seniors and things like what? Where are we going in the different ways? But what I know, one of the things that I didn't see a lot of was families. And I think Waco is known for our familial community, so I don't want to leave them out. We love the young folks. We love the, energy and all that, and the new professionals, because we're seeking them, please come. But in the industry search we're doing in economic development as well, we are seeking families to come here. So I just don't want to alienate or ignore them and leave them out of our ask. Right. Because, we have to ask all the people we want to come, and so we want to make sure that we're bringing energy and attention to that. I think that just in the industry I'm in, the TPID stuff is going to work. So I'm glad that we stepped up and got that done. I think it'll be something that when 2030 comes, it'll be, you can really have some concrete data that will show the advancement of what the TPID did and then what we turned around and did with it. Mm-hmm. So, again, we're here for the work, and we're ready to assist in any way we can in making, developing our brand, seeing it through, but kudos to the work that you've done and your staff.
I'll just echo that too, Todd. Thanks for the report. Yeah, it was worth waiting on. Third time here. Appreciate it. Very good. I like how there's kind of several asks, I think, as you came on staff last year. One of them was kind of to define our branding and messaging. It looks like we're on the right track with that, because that works in so many ways for the city, not just the city of Waco, but the chamber and the cultural arts and the sports commission, and a lot of people were kind of piggybacking off of how we market the city. So I appreciate your efforts in getting that kind of launched. We asked you to get a little more involved with the Magnolia and people in the Magnolia Network, and I've seen that, and I'm very happy about that, because I think it's another thing that the city can piggyback in its marketing efforts with commercials, and you're doing that with the branding and the messaging. And I can just see that we'll, hopefully as they launch their network, that we'll have kind of a presence there. Also, I think it's only beneficial. The KPIs, I like how you're kind of keeping track of some of the key performance indicators and the things that we can kind of as council bite into month to month and quarter to quarter to keep track of how we're doing there, both on the overhead and the performance targets, the revenue targets. And finally, very excited about the TPID. I know we kind of went through logically and methodically on how we're going to get there. And I guess this, maybe a little more information on that. This quarter, by the end of this quarter, we'll have named a board and or at least suggestions on how to launch that. Or we will have launched the TPID by the end of the first quarter. Is that right?
Launching, we're hoping to launch sometime in May. It'll take a little bit to bring resolution and introduce the program service agreement, and once that is ratified, then we'll be able to move forward in a pretty timely fashion.
It's a great idea. The 1.2 million, who knows better how to use it than the hotel people themselves, as far as getting a marketing kind of vehicle and also filling up the rooms. So I'm getting great feedback from the hoteliers on how that's going to work.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
One last thought is hearing, I think, a consistent message of a hope for a deeper dive into our brand. Maybe it'd be helpful at some point to get an informal report on what that plan is for 2020.
Absolutely, be happy to do that.
Could look like.
Good. Yeah.
I'll have a request, but for us, but if you have any more questions for Todd, I don't want to interrupt that before we get into that conversation.
I know. I think we're going to get that.
No, and I think we've heard that loud and clear. And we're, as your representative on the CVB board and CVB chair, we'll definitely work on the branding side. And then this is not in his presentation, but one thing I want to bring up to us, that's my request for this body is, as our rep and as the chair of the CVB, is, a few years ago, we went through a whole process. We convened a task force that included, I don't know, about 9 or 10 members, including Judge Felton and Wes Allison and Fiona and Matt Metters and several others, and myself. I don't know how I got thrown into that one. I was just on the back end. To evaluate and decide the feasibility or what we wanted the structure of the CVB to look like going forward. Each community does it different. Some are under the auspices of the city government like ours are. Some are independent organizations that are answerable to their own board. Some, maybe the facilities versus the tourism marketing side, are kind of hybrid. Lots of different structures, and we're just figuring out which one's right. And so we went through a multi-month process, several meetings, several visioning parts, several, robust discussions with our consultant, Dan Fenton with JLL. And at the end of that, we came to the conclusion that it would be, we thought the best model for us would be to spin the CVB out into a separately incorporated entity to manage itself. For a variety of reasons, we did not take that step immediately. We reconstituted the CVB board and gave it a little more authority to help it act in a not autonomous fashion, but to have a little bit more say and sway over what had been come before, which was just an advisory board. And that's been going well. That's been a little over a year now as well. About the same time you came on, Todd, was about when we did that. But I think as we're looking at this year, and as we're looking at organizationally kind of going forward, both from a facility standpoint and an operational standpoint, there are things that we will need to do, and depending on, I think at this point we need to give some consensus and sort of give some direction, because if it's going to stay a city apparatus, then there's a certain path that'll need to be taken and investment made and whatnot. If we feel like we wanted to take the task force recommendation and the consultant's recommendation and and go ahead and move it towards its own separately incorporated nonprofit, I think we need to be intentional about that and go ahead and just get that done. Because there will be operationally and investment-wise, there will be a different path that you have to take to do that. So I know it's been a little while since we got that task force report, and I know some of y'all weren't involved in that and haven't seen it, but I'd like us to have consensus today, but I would like us to be very intentional and give direction to city staff to help. At this point, we either need to say, yeah, this is something we want to do, because we've been kind of quasi about it. As we've gone through sort of the transitional process, I've said, we're taking this step, but I'm not giving up on still going forward with the task force recommendation to go ahead and move it off into a separate organization. And so I'm asking us to hopefully provide some consensus and direction to staff to say one way or another which way we'd like to go. I'll just say, I was part of that task force. I went into that task force and all of that discussion and process thinking that we probably should leave it as a department of the city. At the end of that discussion, at the end of that visioning process, at the end of kind of going through all the scenarios and taking that robust time to envision what and how it should operate, I came to the conclusion that it should be its own organization and it should be spun off. But y'all didn't have the benefit of those, dozens of hours that I spent thinking about it and reading it and going through it. But I just want to let you know my experience and kind of where I came down. So I really think just for Todd's sake, for staff's sake, for everybody's, to give clarity going forward, we need to help provide a direction one way or another on that. And I'll shut up now.
My recollection, John, was that
I'm sorry, I don't know that we are clearly posted for this discussion about privatizing the CVB board. I was taking your discussion as a request for a future agenda item. I don't know that, we have future activities of the CVB, and so I'm a little bit concerned about that.
I understand that. Are you comfortable with bringing that as a request for future agenda item?
That whole thing is a request for a future,
Yeah.
in the very, very near future.
Yeah, okay.
So
Very good.
I want to discuss this soon.
Yeah.
Mayor, if I can add, in that vein, I recall that the council's initial request was that we maximize our community's investment in this facility. And in that vein, we've had the board, and we've had great leadership from our board chair and from our staff, and we're looking at that. That's something we're looking at, and we anticipate bringing you a report in the next few months on that.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I probably should have said something earlier, but that's how I was interpreting it, and I'm not trying to cut everybody
I'll
else off.
interpret it
as
as
such,
I
yes.
think we're in a good
And I
place.
guess, to add to that, because this is still fairly new to me, I haven't seen the report. I think I would like to see the report and the findings as well, just because I haven't had that opportunity. And so if we can make that a part of the future agenda item as well.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Any other thoughts? Todd, thank you. We really appreciate all the great work you've done this past year, and great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the support.
Thank you.
Great year.
And Mayor and Council, our next work session presentation is a discussion of the brush collection program changes and revisions to solid waste ordinance. And we have Paul Kane, Assistant City Manager. And before he gets started, I want to compliment he and Chuck Dowdell, our solid waste assigned director out there, and some of Chuck's staff, and all the great work they've done trying to pull this information together. This has been a challenge for the department over the last several months, as y'all are aware, and it needs to be addressed with some good solid ordinance changes and a good communication plan. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Assistant City Manager Paul Kane.
Thank you, Wiley. Thank you, Council. It's good to be before you this afternoon to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we faced with our brush program and some of the consequences that have come from that, and talk about our level of service as well, things that we are recommending be done to improve our level of service, and then finally how to codify those changes into an ordinance. Agree with Wiley. Certainly want to thank our solid waste team for all their help and support throughout this effort. As Wiley mentioned, Chuck, Robert, and Anna, and also want to thank Assistant Attorney John Patterson, who was a huge help along the way here. And I can honestly say after 20-something years in municipal government, Chuck is one of the best trash talkers I've ever met. All right. I do want to thank him. Okay. We see, Council, before you, there are some pictures. 2019, as we've discussed in the past, was a challenging year for solid waste operations. We had about 5,000 service requests during the year for brush pickup, about 6,000 tons of brush. Some of these pictures kind of represent some of the challenges that we've encountered over the last year. You see in the kind of starting in the top left there, a lot that essentially has been cleared, and all that brush was left for the city to pick up as part of its brush cleanup program. Moving clockwise, top right, a brush pile that's spilling over into the street. In the middle there, you see another brush pile that's got trash and other debris mingled in with it. That requires our staff to separate that at the landfill and goes in different spots. It certainly increases our workload as well. And then at the bottom right, brush that's piled on top of a water meter, very large chunks of trunk you can see there. They're very difficult to collect. And then finally in the bottom left, brush pile has been added to over time. You can tell by the changes in the colors of the leaves there, and then obviously spilling over one lot to the next. So all these kind of represent some of the challenges that we faced. And one of the things we've done is try to assess how this came to be. We found some contributing factors. One, the level of service is not really laid out in our ordinance. Some parameters in the fee schedule, others or just on the website and attachments to the web page and other things. Without being codified, the level of service is unclear, and it's very difficult for the city to enforce. And to some degree, the level of service is the unintended consequence of some good intentions, such as has occurred in previous responses to storm damage. We've all grown up in Central Texas, know that storms can be violent and strong winds, tornadoes, that kind of thing. And in the past, after those events, the city has appropriately responded with unlimited brush pickup to keep the city clean and clean up after the storms that come through town. While it's good intentioned, the response really didn't contain parameters in terms of how long that service would last, where that service would be offered in the city, those kinds of things. And so as a result, services that were originally offered in response to an emergency continued and became kind of informally the new level of service for us. That level of service has some consequences on city operations and on the department. The unlimited brush program really exceeds the city's capabilities to collect and dispose of the brush, along with all the other services that we provide. To give council some sense of the workload, if you add up all the brush, almost 6,000 tons of brush that's been collected the last year, that would take one truck over 407 days working every day, 8 hours a day to pick up that much brush. That's a lot of brush, and certainly that impacts our operations. And we've had about 1/3 of all the calls that we've received, pardon me, have been for brush collection pickups. So with the demands of just basic solid waste services in the growing parts of the city, as well as the challenges that we've had to staff equipment, we've struggled to maintain the level of service in the solid waste department. Many of the 6,000 tons of of brush were collected on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Those are days that normally are reserved for equipment maintenance and other things. Of course, Saturdays are days off for employees. So that all begins to take a toll on our operations. And speaking of operations, summarizing some of those key impacts, certainly customers are unsatisfied with the look of their neighborhoods. And that's a concern I think all of you are well aware of. And they're frustrated with the delayed response. With the number of work orders we've had, it takes a long time to pick all that up. And that's the frustration and unsatisfaction as well. The core services, as I mentioned, the collection of garbage and trash and recycling is weakened due to the high demand and essentially unlimited sizes of brush that we've had. Equipment maintenance, as I mentioned, was challenged, and of course, personnel, as I mentioned earlier. Another area that probably a lot of the public may not think about in terms of consequences is the increased inequity for ratepayers. We're talking economic inequity here. About 12% of the city's customers requested brush collection services. So with a flat rate structure where everybody pays the same, what that means is 88% of customers are paying for 12% of the customers to have a service. That's further exacerbated when you see these very large piles. So the inequity just increases more and more as the piles get larger and larger. And of course, there's also a subsidy for some in the private sector. The solid waste staff is certainly aware that some commercial businesses and odd jobbers use the city's brush collection program to increase their bottom line. They don't have hauling costs because we'll do that for them. They don't have to pay the tipping fees at the landfill either, so they save money there as well. And all of that means that our solid waste customers are, in essence, paying to increase the bottom line for some of these businesses. And then, in our mind as staff, this certainly doesn't reflect the purpose or intent of a municipal brush collection program. So we went about the business of trying to define what our level of service is and then looking at codifying that level of service in our ordinance. We see before you in the table here the top part, which is in light blue or gray, is our existing level of service with regard to brush collection. In the red text below that are some of the changes that we're recommending. You'll see in the leftmost column there, all of the container sizes are the same. We have added yard waste bags as something that we'll begin collecting. That's something we've heard about in the past from folks, and it gives folks an opportunity to increase their yard waste disposal. The most significant changes you'll see across the chart, we are recommending that brush and tree waste, rather than calling that in, we're recommending that it be collected along with the yard waste. I believe that's twice a month right now, in stacks or piles of limited size. We'll talk about that in a second. We're recommending that the number of free trips to the landfill be cut back from 2 a month, which is 24 trips a year, to 4 trips a year at no charge. And of course, they'll be able to dispose of brush at council district cleanups as well. Finally, with regard to some of the limitations that we're recommending, we would limit it to no more than 20 of the paper leaf bags, that limbs be no larger than 3 inches, and that stacks of brush be cut into 4 by 4 by 4 squares, essentially, when put out for collection. So it's about 2 1/4 cubic yards, equivalent to a full-size pickup filled up to the bed, equal to about 1/2 quart of wood. And also, we want to establish some placement parameters in terms of how do you put it out, where do you put it out, not blocking sidewalks, not blocking water meters, that kind of thing, not blocking field of view for motorists. So some of our pros and cons, I guess you'd say, of our recommendations. We think the city will look better, piles will be smaller, call-ins aren't required anymore, it'll be picked up with the yard waste collection, so it won't sit for days. Residents totally, if you look at the total collection, will be able to put out about 3 1/3 cubic yards of yard waste and tree waste. That's quite a bit. Talked about the size of a pickup. That's equivalent to about 1.5 full-size pickup loads out twice a month. That's a lot of yard waste and a lot of trees. As for the abuses experienced to date, we're certainly hopeful that they'll all go away and end, but certainly we believe these changes will curtail those abuses that we've mentioned. The flexibility for residents will continue with no-charge trips to the landfill, as well as the council cleanup days. We think rate equity is improved by ending the unlimited brush collection, establishing some parameters there that's more fair for everyone. And finally, we've looked at what some other cities have done, and if you look at the monthly rate that's charged in the city of Waco versus the volume of waste that's picked up at the curb, Waco's in, if not at the very top of the list, certainly among the top in terms of service delivery. There are some cons. Piles of larger size would need to be hauled away by a private hauler. The commercial services must dispose of the brush and waste that they create at a permitted facility. And then probably finally, the biggest change is if you're a do-it-yourselfer and doing your tree work, you're gonna have to cut it up into smaller chunks and put those out with a little more order and care than you have in the past. So those are the changes, the pros and cons of the changes that we've come up with. So I'm gonna go through some of the ordinance changes. As we went through the ordinance, we found that it is more than a decade old now. It's fairly general, doesn't really provide a level of specificity that's common in many solid waste ordinances that you might see around the state. So we've done some reorganizing, some rewriting, revision to try to give it a little bit better organization along the way. Article 1, which is kind of the in general part of the ordinance, it addresses a wide range of things not specific to either residential or commercial. We had some definition changes. We've also added 3 new sections here, and just want to highlight those quickly for you. We have codified that there will be special events around the city, and in those cases, you can put it where the city tells you to put it and how the city tells you to put it for those specific events. We've added an abatement capability here that treats violations of the ordinance essentially like a nuisance that you'd see in code enforcement. Gives the city the ability to abate the nuisance. We can charge to have the work done, cleaned up, and then bill the property owner for it. And ultimately, if not paid, then it gives us the same power as you have under typical code enforcement, where you can lien the property for collections of that. So that certainly bolsters that side of things. And then last, we have specifically talked about emergency suspension of the ordinance. The mayor, as the emergency management director under state statute, would have the authority to suspend or amend certain parts of the ordinance for up to 60 days. And council would have the opportunity to weigh in to continue that or not if they wanted to. And we've also added a provision that, where possible, we'd like for that mayoral action to include specific areas of town. For example, if a storm only hits one part of the city, we don't want to open up the whole city to unlimited collection. So that portion has been added as well. Really, the heart of the ordinance change is in Article 2, which deals with residential collection. One of the key elements of the change is certainly in 2123, states that the city will only collect yard waste that results from customary and routine maintenance performed by the occupants of a residential structure, residential property. And that waste that can be contained in a yard waste can or in yard waste bags. So that's a key change there. Similar on the brush side. We've said that collection of brush is for routine single-family residential maintenance, specifically including brush from commercial landscaping and tree services. Talked about when it's collected with the brush days, with the yard waste days, the sizing that we talked about earlier, and prohibitions of commingling that waste with other types of waste, which increases the burden on our staff. There are a number of other changes in the residential section. I'll highlight a couple of these. 2126 provides specific requirements for how to put it out in terms of, like I said earlier, not putting it over sidewalks and water meters, those kinds of things. carts be placed in a manner that allows for us to collect them and access them easily. 2129 revises our bulky waste collection services just a little bit by making sure it's clear that those are on call-in request, call-in basis only, once per month per residence, and we have put in a size limit that was not in the earlier ordinance or in the current ordinance of 8 cubic yards. That's almost 2 full-size pickups filled to the top, to give you some sense of those sizings. So we have added a size limit there as well. And the last thing I'll highlight here, this section also includes the trips to a solid waste facility, 4 trips a year as part of that. And then last, on the commercial collection side, not near as many changes. We have listed a number of prohibited items that they cannot place in the commercial dumpster. Those are items that cause us trouble at the landfill. When that dumpster shows up at the landfill to be dumped, so we want to keep those things out of it to begin with. And then, like in the residential side, we did add a section that says if it's not conforming to the ordinance and it's not allowed for collection by the city, then it needs to be disposed of by the business at a disposal facility. Talk a little bit about next steps. Of course, tonight the council will consider the ordinance on first reading. If approved tonight, it will go to you on second reading on February 4th. We'll finalize our public information and education campaign between now and then. We've talked a little bit with Larry and his folks, and certainly website changes will be part of that. Videos, PSAs, how-to videos, how to put out your trash correctly, those kinds of things will be part of that. Articles and inserts in the water bill. We'll be reaching out to our neighborhood associations along the way, and it'll be part of the City Talk radio video program and in the podcast as well. So trying to reach out to folks as many different ways as we can. Would welcome any suggestions that council might have to make that more successful. All of that would lead to an effective date of March the 1st when we would implement these changes and move forward from here. So I've gone through this rather quickly. I want to stop here at the end and ask if there are any questions or anything that I might can answer or any of our staff can answer.
I'll just kick it off. I like this. This is great. I think it's necessary, and I appreciate all y'all's hard work on it. The only question I have, I mean, and I know as we kind of get into it, if we need to tweak it down the road, we can, if something becomes problematic. But I mean, no, I think this is very needed and an important step to kind of right-size our operations. On the changing from allowing twice a month to say Cobb's to only 4 times a year, what's the kind of thought process behind limiting, you taking away those trips?
Something we talked about a lot. Probably the first thing is we felt the current ordinance or the current practice allowing 2 trips per month of up to a ton each seemed excessive for just residential work. That's a lot of residential work, 24 trips a year. So we thought a change might help to address that. And of course, the other part of this is we have to think of our landfill also in terms of space filling up there and work being done there. So we felt that 4 times a year, in addition to the council district cleanup days, was enough times for a normal single-family operation to take care of their landscaping needs. So that's where it came from. It can be increased, lowered, whatever you feel.
No, I mean, I know you guys have discussed it. I mean, and that's free. They can still go. They'll just have to pay.
Sure,
It's just
that's right.
It's free a year. So yeah,
That's right.
Which is fine. Yeah.
That's right.
That's
Good thought. Good thought.
All right, I'll jump in on this. Paul, great job. I think this program needed brushing up, if you don't.
Oh, come on.
Pardon the pun.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Appreciate that.
I mean, since I've been on council, I've kind of seen this thing evolve from, people in good faith putting their branches and brush out to the side to where we're seeing it's basically a commercial, clearing of a lot and putting it out to the side and expecting the city to come and pick it up, expecting the taxpayers to pay for the pickup.
Right.
And so I am very much in favor of cleaning up this language as you've done, because it stretches our resources. It's not really part of our intended services, and it's kind of evolved into something that it's not meant to be.
Yes, sir.
I think it's good that we emphasize that we are still picking up brush, but it's got to meet this 4x4x4 kind of standard, which is
Yes,
still
sir.
it's a lot of
It
brush. The second point I want to make is the emergency if a storm comes through, a tornado, a heavy storm of some kind, where you do have an inordinate amount of brush, the city will, as I understand it, will try to identify that area of the city where we will kind of
absolutely.
Yeah, be doing something extra and
Sure.
pick that stuff up.
Absolutely.
As part of the responsibility of the city there. Then what I think this does too is it pushes this function into the private sector, which I like too, because I think there's a lot of private haulers that will do this very reasonably at a very reasonable cost. If you have an inordinate amount of brush or trash or whatever you're doing that supersedes the 4x4x4 sort of volume, hopefully, I don't know, I know the city can't get involved in, recommending you go to these, but somehow I think the market will develop a list of reliable guys that could come in and help out the citizens picking up their large amounts of trash.
Yes, sir.
Again, I think it's good to bring clarity to this, and the part of it that we need to be thoughtful of how this works, because we'll have violators and how we deal with those and how we enforce that code, because I think it's important that there is a consequence to just, again, what I hated seeing is basically a commercial cleanup of a lot and putting those trees, which we saw pictures of that, that there's a consequence to that. You don't do that. Anyway, so that's kind of what I had. Paul, great presentation. I think you were bringing good solutions to this issue.
Thank you, sir.
Agree with Jim and John on everything they said. Just to add to that, did you do any checking? And if not, I'm not hyper concerned about this, but peer cities, and are you familiar with how peer cities have handled this?
We did, and there's different ways. Of course, every city is a little different, and some have gone a little bit different direction in terms of charging for large piles of brush around their city. The challenge there for us is it's a workload issue and a supply and demand issue for us. We have such high level of service already, and I think when you look at the other cities, you see that they're not providing the same level of trash, yard waste, and recycling that we are. So from a volume standpoint, I think we're way ahead. Probably would be good, I can provide council all the information that we've pulled from other cities in time between now and the next council meeting and reading, and let you look through that if you have any questions.
I think it'd be helpful, and I think it'd be helpful for our citizens to know how much the level of service they're getting for what they're paying.
Right.
And especially if there's a change like this, I think there's comfort in knowing, hey, you're actually getting a lot of good quality service for what you're paying. And if that exceeds peer cities, then I think that's important to be communicated to our citizens.
Certainly.
I know we're going to do a public information campaign. I think that's great. This might be difficult to do, but when it comes to trash rules, I think it's really convenient if there's that information is on the trash carts that we roll out. So I don't know if there's a sticker or if production going forward as those are distributed for the different, because I know there's a lot of rules for recycling that people don't know.
Sure.
And if you're looking, and sometimes I forget when I'm taking it out there, and I'm like, I wish, so I think that might be something. I don't know how we can distribute that. That was just a harebrained idea, so take it or leave it.
Okay. Thank you.
You mentioned this, but I think if people don't comply, there's going to be good faith. There's going to be people in good faith who don't comply because they don't know the rule, and some of the people that will pay the consequences of their failure to comply will be their neighbors. And there might be some people that don't comply in bad faith, and the people that pay the consequences of that are their neighbors. And so if we're making this policy shift where we're just not going to pick up yard waste that violate our rules any longer, I think we need to think through, and Jim hit on this too a little bit, but I think code enforcement needs to be armed up for this, or maybe not code enforcement, maybe it is solid waste. But when they drive by and they see a violation, there needs to be, I think, some standard notification that goes on that door or is given to that end user that says, hey, there's been a policy change. You need to do this. And if you don't, here's the consequences. And maybe for this first year, I don't know, we're on standby. I don't like the idea of the neighbors paying the consequence of this. And so I don't know how we balance that out. Again, I'm in favor of these changes. But I think that I think that sometimes the people that will suffer will be the people that have neighbors who just don't care, and they don't mind having a chopped up tree in their front yard for 9 months, but their neighbors might.
Right. Good points.
And then when it comes to elderly or low income homeowners, I don't know if there's any local nonprofits that would provide this assistance, that are kind of prepared to provide this assistance. But we might have that available, that information available, and if not, maybe we do contact some churches or nonprofits and say, hey, we're making if it becomes a need, if it actually becomes a need where people are like, look, I can't afford for someone to come and haul this off, that's $500 that I don't got. I think that, if it starts stacking up and we start seeing a problem, and that seems to be what one of the issues is, we might reach out to some people groups that would be willing to provide that assistance, and you can say, hey, this group will do it for you if you're truly in a financial situation where it's you're unable to do that. There's this organization or this church group who will come and haul it off for you. I don't know. Maybe and we can empower those groups to be aware of the issue if it grows up. But I'm just trying to think through what could keep some issues, and that's one that I want to think through. So yeah.
Those are good suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. I really do appreciate you taking the initiative and outlining the services that the city of Waco offers. I want to make very clear that we are not, or you're not proposing that there is an increase in monthly fee. Just the services that we are offering might look differently, and that's okay. We're doing this to better service all of our community members from all parts of Waco that need the help. And so I think this is a step in the right direction. One of the things that you asked for is, how do we get the word out? I think PSAs on radio stations and TV stations are always willing to do that. So that's just an opportunity for you to share that news. Sure. One of the things that you mentioned under the cons is the commercial services must take to, Paul stacks 4x4x4 via private hauler. We might want to give a list just to be proactive, but who are those private haulers? Just so people know who to contact. And I don't know if that list is kept with the city of Waco or Keep Waco Beautiful or something like that. And so I just think it's a great idea to have some type of list that we can share with our community and say, if you need your piles or stacks to be hauled off, here are some people that you can call, and I guess just give as much information as we can as possible. And then the only question that I had is, when are you looking to implement this or make it go into effect?
Targeting March 1st
Okay.
as the official date, and I think we recognize, as council members have pointed out, that this is about code compliance initially as much as code enforcement and educating people and working with them along the way. Certainly, Keep Waco Beautiful as a partner. We'd want to involve some of the things that you're talking about as well. So, and churches, nonprofits is another area. So, but officially March 1st will be our date, and we'll go from there.
And how would you distinguish those that might have been there in their yard before March 1st?
Great question.
How would you distinguish that so people will know, what you're looking for?
One way we can do that is currently they are calling in and letting us know that they have a pile for us to come collect. So that gives us some record of when we received the request. We've even talked about, in some cases, maybe using some environmentally friendly paint, chalk paints, those kinds of things to show, mark certain piles that are out now. So we'll be looking for some ways to do that that's appropriate and effective, but that's a great suggestion, great catch.
Well, and once again, overall, great presentation. The only last thing is just when we get the word out, I know you talked about neighborhood associations, the water bill, PSAs, et cetera. If we can just ensure that we do it in both English and Spanish, so that everyone is on the same page and there are no questions asked. And so I think that would be very beneficial and helpful as well. But overall, thank you, Paul, for your presentation and the work that, the research that you've done going into this. And so it really is important to know that the services that we offer versus our peer cities and the price that we're charging, it's very nominal compared to the services that we're offering. And so kudos to you on doing everything you can to ensure that the rate stays at the same. We just have to change the services that we might be able to offer. So thank you for that.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for this presentation. And like my colleagues, I agree that this is just a change that we probably will have to see. I don't know. You said, I don't know if it's always been unlimited pickup or if it's in the last iteration of what this looks like, but that is something that many cities do not do at all. And I think one of the problems is that, you know, we've never made that clear, really what all we do. You know, if I'm gonna say anything from up here, it's gonna be how we communicate with our people. And, you know, you kind of have to say, and I think it's a point for us now to say, these are the things that we do. These are the things that other cities do, large and small. Not that, you know, kudos to the city of Waco, but I think people need to be aware of what we do. Councilmember Sabito mentioned a list, and I was thinking to myself, would I know who to call? But I know that we have to be very careful in that because we can't make endorsements of businesses. So I encourage you to be mindful of that as we're trying to figure out the options of how we get that information to people. In this, the 12% of the people who are really using this, you know, as we're careful to not burden our elderly or, you know, our lower socioeconomic community constituents, do we know who's really using? I mean, do we have is there data to really identify if we will be, you know, and how much will we have to reach out to nonprofits to find another resource for those bodies and those constituencies? I mean, do we know? Because I don't want to just.
I think the best way to answer that, it's knowable.
Yeah.
We do have address information, those kinds of things, and we can look at creating some GIS maps that
Sure.
will show us
Okay.
where those are.
Okay, and then that leads to, then we really need to push on for organizations when we're having council-wide, district-wide cleanup days. And so, you know, these are your opportunities to, if you're gonna do it,
Now's the time.
Right,
do it at these times of the year.
right.
Councilmember Meek, the stickers and things on garbage cans are a great idea, cause yeah, it's all fun and games till you get it down there, you're like, I don't know what's supposed to go in here. I don't remember what that measurement was. So I think that there does have to be a way for us to effectively do it. And I'll end with, if we're gonna begin in March, if you would consider, you're gonna have to do at least a 6-month window of grace.
Right. Okay.
Because no one's gonna know from day one. And that's heavy communication pieces. You know, I think that just like January, people are inundated with fitness ads. In March, we need to be inundated with what these changes to the City of Waco brush program looks like. Because, you know, it's spring cleaning, especially. And that's the time when we're really going to get rid of, you know, we're starting to bloom and blossom and all those things. So we're going to throw out and, you know, and prepare for the fall season. So I think that if we do it, when we do it, just make sure that we do it right, cover our bases, get our communities informed, and just go with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great suggestions. Thank you.
Anything else? I agree with what's been said, and I do applaud you all for trying to address this problem that's really gotten out of hand. I just have one question about the bags. Currently, I guess we are picking up plastic bags full of leaves, is that correct?
That's a detail, Mayor, I'd have to.
Because it seems, I see them
staff to
stacked along the.
I believe we are.
The curbs, and I don't think we're supposed to be
You're not
picking those
supposed
up
to be.
now. So I'd like to get a little clarity on that if we could.
Good afternoon. Chuck Dowdell, acting as the Director of Solid Waste. Yes, we do pick up those bags. Those bags have to go to the trash piles. We cannot divert them, so therefore we do not get the diversion credit. And that's an issue for us because we cannot mix plastic with the shredding that goes
Right,
on. So we're trying to move away from that and get into just the paper bags that can be shred. It's a cellulose product and we can divert that.
So this will be a significant change for people that have been putting their leaves and lawn waste in plastic bags. And I just think it's going to be really hard that communication piece is going to be a real challenge. I think it's important. I think we need to do it. It's more, you know, those paper bags are quite a bit more expensive than
But don't we still
plastic
have the
bag.
green container?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but I'm talking, I mean, I'll see
Heavy truck, big,
20,
big,
20
big,
bags of leaves that are,
Especially
long
spring
ways.
and fall, yeah.
So I just echo everything that they've been saying in terms of communication. This is going to be a challenge. I think we need to try to get with the Trib and with the local TV stations to do stories about this and try to help people understand. But I mean, I don't know how long we continue to pick up those plastic bags after we say we're not going to do it anymore. Seems like they ought to be noticed once and then not picked up again.
We, yes, sir, we have some residences that, I can tell you, we've picked up 50 or more plastic bags of leaves. So yes, it will be a change, but that is an awful lot of leaves.
Yep, yeah, that's right. And then the other question is, if they don't want to do this and they say, well, we're not going to bag them up or we're going to blow them into the street, and then they end up in our storm drains, what kind of problem does that create?
Good point.
If the leaves go into the trash, that's the way people used to do it. They used to put them in their, excuse me, struggling with a little bit of allergies. They used to put them in their gray cans. So now we offer up to 2 of these green carts. So if they can't be placed in there and they have no other option but to put them in the plastic bag, that's going to go to the garbage pile.
I think to your question specifically, Mayor, with regard to the storm drains, that's a violation of our permit. I believe it is in most cities because that takes oxygen out of the water and other things. So that's not allowed under a stormwater permit to just blow it in the street. Some cities, particularly in the northeast, they send street sweepers down at certain times of the year to collect all the leaves that are pushed out in the street, but that's not a practice that we have here, and most Texas cities don't.
Well, I think we're going to have to look at how a lot of our commercial lawn and landscape people are doing things, because I see that happening all the time.
Yes, sir. Agreed.
Okay,
Lots of education with this, certainly.
right. All right, anything else? Thank you, Paul and Chuck. Thank y'all and your team for the work on this.
Appreciate it.
Very good. All right, are there any additional requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, we will now recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 4:31 p.m.
Notice is hereby given that the City Council will go into executive session in accordance with the following provisions. 1, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, and real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072, City of Waco versus Restoration Station, LLC, et al., cause number 2013-1429-4, pending in the 170th Judicial District Court. 2, real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072. 3, economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087. And 4, personnel, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.074, City Manager Wiley Stem III. We are now in executive session at 4:32 p.m.